So in less than an hour, the Pentagon is set to give an update on Operation Epic Fury as European leaders push to cut the U.S. out of the Strait of Hormuz. Meantime, President Trump is calling out our allies for not jumping in to back America in the fight against Iran.
We've had no help, zero, from NATO. We're there for them. They're not there for us. And they should have been better. They should have said, we'll send somebody. It's a small operation compared to a big operation. But NATO was not there for us.
And listen to this, a new report revealing NATO is apparently making plans in case America pulls out of the alliance. Here to give us some insight into what NATO might be thinking is Jens Stoltenberg. He's the Minister of Finance in Norway and, more importantly, former NATO General Secretary, Secretary General. Thanks so much. Great to see you, Mr. Secretary. Your thoughts about the state of NATO right now, and I understand you think Europe made the right decision not helping us.
So first of all, thank you for having me back on this show. Second, I think that, of course, NATO is facing some serious challenges, and we once again see that there are disagreements between NATO allies. But this is not the first time we see that. We are 32 countries from both sides of the Atlantic, and of course there are differences. But what NATO has proved again and again is that we have been able, and we are able, to overcome differences and then stand together and protect each other, because we are safer when we stand together than when we are apart.
But do you support NATO not letting America use our own bases in places like Italy and, to a degree, in France and certainly in Spain? We can't even use the airspace in Spain. Is that the way an alliance should be acting?
Well, it's not for me to speak on behalf of NATO anymore. I'm not the Secretary General, but I can say is to refer to what Mark Rutte, the current Secretary General, stated very clearly, that the majority of NATO allies, they made available their bases, their airspace, logistic infrastructure to facilitate the U.S. operations. Then there were some exceptions from that main, message. I think we then also need to understand that to make this a NATO operation, it has to be consultations, there has to be a decision-making process within NATO, and that hasn't taken place. So I think what we need to do now is to look forward, how to maintain and sustain the ceasefire, how to open the Strait of Hormuz, which is good for the whole world economy, for prices, for gasoline, for inflation. And thirdly, European allies are actually meeting this week to sit down and see how can they contribute in different ways to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Without us, Mr. Secretary, I know you're not, you know NATO as well as anyone in the world. Even though that's not your job now, they begged you to stay on, and you did over and over again because you did such a great job. But right now, NATO's meeting without us and planning on, after the fight's over, keeping the strait open without us. Is that a healthy look for the NATO?
But again, I think we need to distinguish a bit between NATO as an institution where decision has to be made unanimous. All allies have to agree on every step. And of course, that's a decision-making process that takes time, and it's not always to get 100% agreement. That's NATO as an institution. Then NATO allies can, of course, act individually, and they have done so in different ways. And I think we should all welcome that European countries are now sitting down and discussing how can we contribute to something which is important for Europe, for the US, for everyone, to help to secure safe passage and to reopen the Straits of Hormuz.
But Mr. Stoltenberg, they're meeting without the U.S., planning for things without the U.S. They're also looking forward to saying how NATO would be without the U.S. Do you think that's the way they should be handling this? Just in your opinion. I know you're not General Secretary anymore.
No, but I don't think actually this is about going without the U.S. I think what the Europeans are discussing now, far beyond the issue of Iran, is how can we strengthen the European pillar within NATO. And that's exactly to follow up what President Trump and many others have called for many, many years. And that is that Europeans have to do more, they have to invest more, they need more forces, higher readiness. And I think that the more they do of that, the better, because it will, first of all, make the Europeans more able to defend themselves. Second, it will demonstrate to the United States that they carry their part of the burden, and I think that will make the United States more willing to also stand by NATO.
Last question. When you saw that rocket get within a few miles of Diego Garcia until it was knocked down, knowing the Iranians have now proven they can hit every European capital, how can they continue to say this is not in NATO's best interest to address the Iranian situation, even if their feelings are hurt, they weren't consulted in detail ahead of time?
I think all European countries are heavily against the Iran nuclear program. The Iran nuclear program is violating international law, is violating many UN resolutions, and therefore European countries have supported many efforts to stop that program through, for instance, heavy sanctions, diplomatic, political pressure. So the disagreement is not about whether we dislike the Iranian regime, how they kill their own people and how they develop missiles and nuclear weapons. We all are heavily against. So the question is, how do we best get there to limit their program?
So you have one group who said, I have a good idea, let's not do anything. And then you have the United States says, this is not tolerable, we have to do something. So people can pick what the best strategy is.
Well, I don't think it's about doing nothing. European allies.
What are they doing? What are they doing?
Well, they have imposed very heavy sanctions. Hardly any country.
And how's that going?
Well, it helped us to get a deal some years ago, the Iran nuclear deal.
And how was that? Building rockets, financing proxies, that brought the chaos, that brought October 7th.
But I think we are in a world where we don't have any ideal and easy solutions. I think that what we have seen over the last weeks demonstrates how
But you have a president taking action instead of talking. He finally took action because the talking was doing nothing.
Well, there are many ways of putting pressure on Iran, and I think we should sit down, Europe, North America, many other countries, and find out how can we have maximum pressure on Iran so we can minimize the risk for them being able to develop weapons no one likes and we all are against. But I think that should not overshadow what is really important now, and that is that European allies have taken, as I say, it's very serious, the message from the United States. And they're now spending more on defense than they've done for decades. They are increasing their military presence in the eastern part of the alliance. And actually now several European countries which are spending a larger share of their GDP on defense than the United States. Yeah, and that's a good thing. And that's a result. Yeah, absolutely. And there is a result of a clear message from the president.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Always great having you on.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.